The old farmhouse sat in the middle of nowhere, deep in the shadow of Black Hollow Forest, just outside a forgotten county road in West Virginia. The building had been abandoned for nearly 70 years, its paint peeling like rotting skin, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Locals whispered about it in hushed tones. Some claimed the land was cursed. Others said the family who lived there vanished without explanation. Nobody dared to step inside anymore. Nobody, except for 6 outsiders who thought it would be a fun getaway. These are 6 characters of the story. Ethan Miller, age 28, the adventurous type. He organized the trip, always chasing thrills, the one who rented the farmhouse for the weekend. Rachel Carter, age 26, Ethan's girlfriend. Smart, cautious, uneasy about the farmhouse from the very beginning. Marcus Johnson, age 29, Ethan's best friend. Big personality, jokester, but deep down a skeptic who doesn't believe in the supernatural. Lily Thompson, age 25, quiet and artistic. She paints, loves photography, and wanted to capture the farmhouse for inspiration. David Torres, age 27, medical student. Logical, brave, but haunted by nightmares since childhood. Sophia Clark, age 26, Lily's best friend. Outgoing, bold, and always looking for excitement. The group had been driving for hours, their SUV bouncing along the cracked road as dusk painted the sky in strokes of crimson and gold. "This place is in the middle of nowhere," Sophia muttered, peering out the window at the looming tree line. "That's the point." Ethan grinned. No neighbors, no traffic, no noise. Just us, the stars, and some good memories. Rachel frowned. "Or ghosts," she whispered under her breath, but nobody seemed to hear her. The farmhouse appeared as they rounded a bend, its silhouette framed against the dying light. It looked wrong, too tall, too narrow, its roof sagging like a broken spine. A single windmill beside it creaked in the fading wind, the sound like a groan. "Creepy as hell." Marcus laughed nervously. "Ethan, you sure this isn't condemned?" They pulled up in front, headlights sweeping across the weathered porch. The steps sagged under their boots as they carried bags inside. Dust clouded the air, and the smell of mildew and rot lingered in every corner. Lily raised her camera, snapping photos. "This place is perfect," she said softly. "It feels frozen in time." David adjusted his glasses, scanning the old furniture covered in white sheets. "Frozen in death, maybe," he muttered. They chose rooms upstairs, tossing bags onto sagging mattresses. Once settled, they gathered in the kitchen, lit candles, and shared food and drinks. For a while, laughter filled the house. But as night fell and the forest outside turned black, the farmhouse seemed to shift. The walls groaned. Floorboards creaked when no one walked on them. A faint scratching echoed from the attic. Rachel froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Did you hear that?" The group went silent. There it was again. Scratching. Slow. Deliberate. Above them. Ethan forced a laugh. Probably a raccoon. But when Lily raised her camera to take another picture, the flash illuminated the hallway behind them, and for the briefest second, she saw a shadowy figure standing at the end of the corridor. When the flash died, the hallway was empty. Her hand trembled. "Guys, I think we're not alone in here." The farmhouse had awakened. The group tried to brush it off, telling themselves it was nothing more than the house settling. But unease clung to the air like smoke. After Lily's unsettling photograph, nobody laughed as easily anymore. They moved back to the living room, where a large fireplace stood cold and empty. Ethan suggested building a fire to brighten the mood, so Marcus gathered wood from outside. The others lit candles, their flames trembling even though the air was still. Rachel sat close to Ethan. "I don't like this," she whispered. "There's something about this place. It doesn't want us here." Ethan squeezed her hand. "It's just a house, Rach. Old and creaky. That's all." But as Marcus returned with firewood, the front door slammed shut behind him with a thunderous bang. He dropped the logs, swearing. I didn't touch it, he snapped, rattling the knob. The door wouldn't budge. David came over trying. Locked. From the inside. That doesn't make sense, he muttered. Lily stared at the door, her camera dangling from her neck. It doesn't want us to leave, she said quietly. Marcus shook his head. Bullshit. It's just warped wood or something. Still, everyone sat closer together after that. The fire crackled to life, its glow flickering across their pale faces. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls, twisting, bending, moving when no one else did. Sophia tried to break the tension. Okay, let's play a game. Truth or dare. Or ghost stories. Something to lighten the mood. Not funny, Rachel muttered. But Sophia pressed on, daring Lily to take a photo with the flash off, just using candlelight. Lily reluctantly lifted her camera and clicked. The dim light burned an image into the screen. When she looked at the photo, her face drained of color. Everyone looked. On the small display, behind them in the firelit room, stood a figure. Tall, thin, head tilted unnaturally to one side. Its eyes were nothing but black voids. Everyone turned to the empty corner where the figure should have been. Nothing. Just flickering shadows. Delete it, Ethan said firmly, his voice shaking. But Lily couldn't. Her hands trembled as she held the camera. I think it wants us to see it. A sudden crash echoed from upstairs. Something heavy had fallen, shaking the ceiling above them. David stood. Okay, enough. I'll check it out. Don't, Rachel hissed. But Ethan, Marcus, and Sophia followed anyway. The stairs moaned beneath their feet as they climbed into the dark second floor, candle flames threatening to die out. At the end of the hall, a bedroom door swung open slowly, creaking as though pushed by unseen hands. Inside, the sheets covering the furniture were ripped, shredded like claws had torn through them. And on the wall, scratched deep into the wood, were words. Leave before the sun dies. Marcus stepped back. What the hell? Behind them, the hallway groaned. And when they turned, the figure from the photograph was there, standing at the far end. Its head twitched. 1 step, 2 steps, moving toward them. The group screamed, rushing back down the stairs, nearly toppling over each other. They slammed the living room door shut, hearts pounding, as the sound of slow, dragging footsteps echoed above them. The farmhouse was no longer just haunted. It was hunting. The 6 friends huddled in the living room. The fire's glow now their only comfort. Every creak of the house echoed through their bones. Nobody spoke for a long time, each listening to the slow, deliberate footsteps that wandered above them. Rachel broke the silence. We have to leave. Now. I don't care how we can't stay here. Marcus shook his head. The door's jammed, remember? And we're miles from the nearest gas station. Even if we run, where would we go? The windows, David said, his voice steady but strained. We break one, crawl out, and make a run for it. Ethan grabbed a fire poker and led them to the nearest window. He swung hard. The glass cracked, but instead of shattering outward, it cracked inward, as though something on the outside had struck back. The candle flame snuffed out. In the sudden darkness, Rachel screamed. Hands fumbled for matches, a lighter, anything. When Ethan finally relit a candle, the fire revealed a handprint on the inside of the cracked glass. Long, bony fingers, too long to be human. Sophia backed away, trembling. This isn't real. This isn't happening. David forced a breath. It's happening, and we need to keep calm. Lily clutched her camera, refusing to lower it. It doesn't want us to leave, she whispered. It wants us to stay. The group retreated once more to the living room, doors locked, candles flickering. But fear gnawed at them. They knew they couldn't last the night without doing something. Sophia suddenly stood. I'm not sitting here waiting to die. I'm going upstairs. Don't, Marcus snapped, grabbing her wrist. But she yanked free. No, Whatever's up there, it's just a trick. I'm not going to let some stupid house scare me. Before anyone could stop her, Sophia stormed up the stairs, the others trailing helplessly behind until she disappeared into one of the dark rooms. "Don't go in there," Ethan shouted, but it was too late. The door slammed shut behind her. Inside, Sophia's scream split the silence, the kind of scream that made blood run cold. They rushed to the door, pounding on it. "Sophia, open it. Open it now," Ethan cried. The screaming stopped. Silence. Then came a whisper from inside, chilling and distorted. Not Sophia's voice. "One by one, you'll never leave." The door creaked open slowly. The room was empty. Dust-covered furniture. Torn sheets. No Sophia. Rachel's voice broke. Where's she?" Ethan stepped inside, scanning with the candle. "She has to be here. She can't just vanish." Lily raised her camera and snapped another photo in desperation. The flash burst, lighting the room for a split second. When the photo appeared on the screen, they all gasped. In the corner of the room, half hidden in the shadows, was Sophia, her mouth open in a silent scream, her eyes wide with terror, hands clawing at something no one else could see. But in reality, the corner was empty. Sophia was gone. The farmhouse had claimed its first victim. Sophia's disappearance left the farmhouse heavy with dread. No one spoke as they gathered in the hallway, their faces pale, breaths uneven, the silence of the house pressed down like a suffocating blanket. Rachel gripped Ethan's arm. "She's gone. She's gone, Ethan. We need to leave right now." Ethan shook his head violently. "We can't leave her behind. We have to find her. Maybe she found another way out." Marcus growled, running a hand over his face. "Another way out? Did you see that picture, Ethan? She's gone. She's not coming back." David tried to steady his voice. "Look, arguing isn't helping. If Sophia is here alive, we need to split up and search. Cover more ground." Rachel gasped. "Split up? Are you insane? That's exactly what it wants us to do." But the group was unraveling. Fear sharpened every word, every glance. Ethan refused to give up on Sophia, while Marcus insisted they focus on survival. Lily stood silently, clutching her camera like a weapon, her wide eyes darting toward every shadow. Finally, Ethan decided, "Marcus and I will check the basement. Rachel, Lily, and David, search the upstairs rooms again. If we find nothing, we meet back here in 10 minutes. Agreed." Nobody agreed, but nobody argued. They moved in separate directions, their candlelight spilling across the rotting walls. Downstairs, Ethan and Marcus. The basement door groaned as Ethan forced it open. A wave of mildew and damp washed over them. The stairs creaked, and every step seemed to echo too loudly. Marcus muttered, "This is a mistake," but followed anyway. At the bottom, they found shelves of broken jars, rusted tools, and old furniture shrouded in cobwebs. The smell of something foul lingered, like rotten meat. Then a sound. Breathing. Heavy, labored breathing coming from a far corner. Ethan raised his candle, its weak glow revealing a figure crouched in the shadows. His heart leapt. "Sophia," he whispered. The figure straightened, tall and wrong. Its head bent too far to the side, like its neck had been snapped. When the light hit its face, there were no eyes, just black pits. It lunged forward. Ethan and Marcus scrambled, tripping over debris as the thing rushed at them with unnatural speed. They slammed the basement door shut just in time, the wood shaking violently as claws raked across the other side. Marcus collapsed against the wall, gasping. That wasn't Sophia. That wasn't. Ethan shook, gripping the poker tighter. "Don't say it." Upstairs, Rachel, Lily, and David. The three searched room after room, finding nothing but dust and decay. Every mirror they passed was cracked. But in one, Rachel swore she saw Sophia's face staring back at her, her lips moving silently before the glass shattered on its own. Lily raised her camera, desperate for proof, snapping photos in the dark. Every shot came back worse. Shadows behind them that weren't there. A pale hand on David's shoulder. Something crawling along the ceiling. Rachel whispered, "This house is alive. It's watching us." Suddenly, from the last room on the hall, a voice called, "Rachel, help me." Rachel froze. It was Sophia's voice. She bolted down the hall before anyone could stop her, throwing the door wide open. The room was pitch black. Only a single chair sat in the center. On it lay a folded piece of paper. She snatched it up, opening it with trembling hands. The words inside were written in something dark and smeared, something that looked like dried blood. "You're next." The door slammed shut behind her, separating her from David and Lily. Her scream echoed down the hall. Rachel slammed her fists against the door, screaming for help. The wood was solid, unyielding, and her voice echoed like the walls themselves were mocking her. Her candle sputtered and died, plunging the room into pitch black. "Ethan, David, somebody please." Silence, then a whisper, so faint it was almost inside her head. "Rachel." Her breath caught. The voice was familiar. "Sophia." She spun, searching the darkness. "Sophia, where are you?" The shadows shifted. Something moved in the far corner of the room, slow and deliberate. Candlelight wasn't needed. Rachel could feel it there, watching. Suddenly, a match flared to life by itself, floating in the air, illuminating Sophia's face. Pale, smiling, but her smile was wrong. Stretched too wide, teeth too sharp. "Come with me," Sophia whispered. "It's better on the other side." Rachel stumbled back. "You're not her. You're not real." The match went out. Something crawled across the ceiling, nails scratching the wood. Rachel pressed against the wall, heart hammering, when her foot struck something soft. She looked down and saw a severed hand on the floor. It twitched. Rachel screamed and kicked it away, but when she looked again, it was gone. In its place was the folded note she had found earlier. The writing on it had changed. Now it read, "Open the door." The knob rattled violently from the inside. Her own hand, against her will, reached toward it. "No, no, stop," she sobbed, fighting for control. Her fingers brushed the handle, and suddenly the door burst open. David and Lily yanked her out, pulling her into the hall. Her face was pale, eyes wide, sweat dripping down her forehead. "What happened?" David demanded. Rachel gasped, clutching her chest. "It had showed me Sophia, but it wasn't her. It wants me to follow." Before anyone could respond, Ethan and Marcus came running upstairs, their faces white as chalk. "There's something in the basement," Ethan panted. "It almost got us." Rachel grabbed his arm, her voice shaking. "It wants us one by one. That's how it works. Sophia's gone, and I was next." Marcus muttered under his breath. "Then who's after Rachel?" The sound of chains. The group barely had time to process before a new sound filled the house. A dragging noise. Heavy, metallic, like chains being pulled across the wooden floor. From downstairs, the sound grew louder, closer. The floorboards shook with each pull. Lily raised her camera with trembling hands, whispering, "Don't move." But the chains dragged up the stairs, clattering against the walls, invisible, deafening. The sound stopped directly outside the door they stood in. Then a voice, low and guttural, seeped through the wood. "Let me in." Nobody breathed. The knob twisted. The doorknob rattled violently, as though something enormous was forcing its way in. The chains outside scraped louder and louder, wrapping around the wood, tightening like a serpent. Marcus shoved his shoulder against the door. "Help me hold it." Ethan and David joined, bracing their weight. The wood groaned, splintering under impossible strength. From the hallway came a deafening roar, a sound not quite human, like metal grinding against bone. The temperature plummeted, their breath fogging the air. Rachel clutched Lily, trembling. It's going to break through. Suddenly, silence. Everyone froze. Even the chains stopped moving. The house held its breath. Then, bang, the door exploded inward, sending Marcus flying to the floor. A shadow filled the frame, blacker than darkness, dragging chains that moved like living things. The figure had no face, only a gaping hole where its head should have been. Ethan swung the fire poker wildly. Stay back. The poker passed through the shadow like smoke, clattering uselessly to the ground. Chains lashed out. One wrapped around Marcus's ankle, yanking him across the floor. He screamed, clawing at the wood as the others grabbed for him. Don't let go. Rachel shrieked, holding his arm, but the chains tightened, pulling harder. His skin tore under their grip, blood smearing the floorboards. Marcus's eyes went wide with terror. Help me, please. Another chain shot out, striking Ethan across the chest, knocking him back. Rachel lost her grip. With a final jerk, Marcus was ripped from their hands, dragged screaming down the hall into the darkness. His voice echoed until it was swallowed by silence. Only the sound of chains dragging away remained, then nothing. Marcus was gone. The group collapsed in shock, gasping. Rachel sobbed into Ethan's chest. It took him. Oh God, it took him. David's hands shook as he pressed them against his ears. This isn't random. It's hunting us. It's picking us off, one at a time. Lily lowered her camera slowly, her face pale. I got it. I took a picture. She showed the screen. The blurry image showed Marcus being pulled down the hall, but behind him, in the shadows, dozens of pale faces could be seen. Faces pressed against the walls, watching, smiling. Ethan's stomach turned. We have to get out. Now. I don't care how, we're not staying here. But when they rushed back to the stairs, they stopped cold. The front door, their only way out, was gone. Not broken, not blocked, just gone. Where the door should have been was now solid wall. Wallpaper stretched seamlessly across it. The farmhouse had sealed them inside. The 4 remaining survivors stood in stunned silence, staring at the wall where the front door had been only minutes ago. Their last chance of escape had vanished into plaster and peeling wallpaper. Rachel's voice cracked. It is sealing us in. It won't let us go. David pressed his hands into his hair, pacing. No, there has to be another way. Houses don't just eat their doors. There's a cellar, an attic, windows upstairs. We'll find something. Ethan clenched his jaw. Then we split up again. No wandering off alone, though. Pairs only. Agreed. Nobody argued this time. Ethan and Rachel headed upstairs. David and Lily went toward the kitchen and back hallway. Upstairs, Ethan and Rachel. The upstairs hall stretched longer than before, impossibly so. What had once been 5 doors was now 10, each one identical. The air felt thick, pressing down on them like water. Rachel whispered, "This isn't right. The house is changing." They opened one door after another, empty rooms, stripped bare. But each time they turned back to the hall, the doors behind them had vanished, replaced by endless wallpaper. Ethan muttered, "We're walking in circles. It's playing tricks." As they pressed forward, Rachel stopped suddenly. A child's laughter drifted down the hall. High-pitched, innocent, but warped like it was playing backward. Ethan raised the poker again. "Stay behind me." At the end of the corridor, a small figure stood. A girl in a white dress, hair covering her face. She tilted her head, then lifted a hand and pointed to a door. "Don't follow it," Rachel whispered. But Ethan's body moved without him, legs stiff, dragging toward the door. He fought it, but something pulled. Rachel grabbed his arm, yanking him back. The girl vanished. The door she had pointed to slammed shut on its own. Downstairs, David and Lily. The kitchen reeked of mold and something rotten. Cabinets banged open and shut as though unseen hands rifled through them. David pushed on a back door, but it wouldn't move. He grabbed a chair and smashed the glass. The shards fell inward, But beyond the frame wasn't the forest. It was another hallway, identical to the one upstairs. Lily snapped a picture. The flash revealed something hunched in the new hallway, too tall, with arms scraping the floor. By the time the photo cleared, the frame was empty. Her hands trembled. "David, it's building a maze around us." David turned to her, whispering, "Then we stick together. Don't lose sight of me." But when he looked back, Lily was gone. The chair lay tipped over. Her camera rested on the counter. David's throat closed. "Lily? Lily?" Lily's isolation. Lily blinked. The kitchen was gone. She stood in a long, narrow room lined with mirrors. Her reflection stretched in every direction, warped and twisted. She spun, searching for the others. "Hello." All the mirrors reflected her, except one. In that one, she wasn't alone. Sophia stood beside her reflection, smiling wide, her lips whispering words Lily couldn't hear. Then, one by one, the other mirrors stopped reflecting Lily. They reflected Sophia instead. Hundreds of Sophias, all staring at her. And in the real room, footsteps dragged closer behind her. The farmhouse grew unnervingly silent after they discovered the blood on the walls. The storm outside continued, but inside, it felt as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. The group gathered in the living room, their flashlights trembling in their hands. "Those scratches," Daniel whispered, pointing back toward the hallway. "They weren't there when we came in." Rachel shivered. They were fresh, the wood was splintered. Something was clawing at the walls while we were inside. Nobody dared to argue. The thought that something unseen had been lurking among them sent a wave of dread across the group. Suddenly, the old grandfather clock in the corner, a piece they hadn't even noticed before, struck midnight. The chimes echoed too loudly for such a small room, reverberating like the tolling of funeral bells. Each strike felt like a countdown. On the 8th chime, the walls groaned. Long, deep scratches began etching themselves into the wood right in front of their eyes. Invisible claws dragged down the planks with a shrill screech that rattled their bones. "Run," Sophie cried, but her voice broke halfway into a sob. They stumbled back toward the kitchen, but as they moved, the scratches followed them. On the walls, the ceiling, the floor. It was as though the house was alive, branding itself with signs of rage. In the kitchen, Marcus tried to steady himself by gripping the counter. That was when his eyes widened, his face paling. The countertop beneath his hands was moving. At first, it seemed like cracks forming, but then the cracks opened like veins, pulsing dark liquid that smelled of rot and blood. He yanked his hands back, horrified. "This place isn't haunted," Marcus whispered. "It's alive." Before anyone could respond, the sound of scratching returned, this time not on the walls, but behind them, directly inside the walls. Something was crawling within, fast, erratic, circling them like a predator waiting for the kill. The group pressed together, their breaths quick and shallow. Then, from behind the plaster, came the sound of laughter, high-pitched, broken, as if a child were mocking them from within the walls themselves. The lights flickered, then went out, and in the pitch black, the scratching stopped. Darkness swallowed the farmhouse. The silence that followed was worse than the scratching. It was total, suffocating. Only their shallow breaths and the drumming of the rain on the roof filled the void. "Don't move," Daniel whispered. "It can hear us." But Sophie couldn't stop trembling. She clicked her flashlight on. Its weak beam shook as it revealed the kitchen once more. Only now, the walls were swollen, bulging outward as if something was pressing against them from inside. "Oh my God," Rachel muttered, clutching Sophie's arm. The bulges shifted, moving fast, darting from one wall to another, circling them like a predator stalking prey. Then, without warning, the plaster behind Marcus burst open. A clawed hand, pale and impossibly long, shot out from the wall and grabbed his shoulder. The group screamed. Marcus struggled, clawing at the countertop, but the thing's grip was too strong. He was yanked halfway into the wall, his body folding unnaturally as though the farmhouse itself was trying to swallow him. "Grab him," Ethan shouted, lunging forward. He caught Marcus by the wrists, pulling with all his strength. Rachel and Sophie joined, screaming his name, tears streaming down their faces. For a brief second, it looked like they might succeed. Marcus's chest emerged from the wall, his face twisted with terror. "Don't let go," he begged. His eyes locked on Daniel. "Don't." But then the laughter returned, the same childlike giggle they had heard before. The wall opened wider, revealing a gaping, pulsing void filled with writhing shadows. With a violent jerk, Marcus was torn from their hands. His scream echoed as the wall slammed shut, leaving nothing but deep claw marks in the wood where he had been dragged inside. The farmhouse fell silent again. The four remaining friends stumbled back, trembling. Rachel collapsed against the counter, sobbing uncontrollably. Sophie covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide with disbelief. Daniel stared at the spot where Marcus had been. His voice was hollow, almost mechanical when he finally spoke. "It doesn't want us to leave. It's feeding." At that exact moment, the kitchen door slammed shut on its own. The sound of locks sliding into place echoed, though none of them had touched it. Then, slowly, the scratching started again, this time from inside the ceiling above them, and something heavy began crawling across the beams, inching toward them. The scratching in the ceiling grew louder, heavier, like claws dragging along wooden beams. Dust sprinkled down, and the entire kitchen seemed to creak under the unseen weight. Ethan raised his flashlight, his hand trembling so badly that the beams shook across the ceiling. "It's right above us," he whispered. Then, suddenly, thud. Something slammed down from above, hard enough to rattle the cabinets. The ceiling bulged, the wood bending unnaturally, and then another thud closer. Step by step, the thing crawled directly over their heads. Rachel let out a strangled sob. "It's hunting us." The bulge stopped right above Sophie. Her eyes widened, frozen in fear. Then, before anyone could react, a clawed hand punched straight through the ceiling, grabbing a fistful of Sophie's hair. She screamed, thrashing as the thing tried to pull her upward through the jagged hole. "Hold her," Daniel shouted, lunging forward. He wrapped his arms around Sophie's waist, pulling against the inhuman strength from above. Blood ran down her scalp, where the claws dug in. Ethan grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a rusted cast-iron pan, and swung it with all his might at the clawed hand. The sound was sickening, like metal on bone. The hand let out an ear-splitting screech before retreating back into the darkness above. Sophie collapsed into Daniel's arms, sobbing, blood streaking down her face. The ceiling above them pulsed, groaned, and then went quiet. Rachel clutched Sophie's trembling hands. "We can't stay down here. It knows where we are." Ethan, still holding the pan, looked around wildly. "Then where do we go? Every door is locking itself. The walls are alive. The ceiling's trying to eat us. What's left?" Daniel's flashlight caught the staircase at the far end of the hallway. The old steps spiraled upward into shadow. The wood warped and dark. "Upstairs," he said grimly. "If we stay here, it'll pick us off one by one." Rachel shook her head violently. "You're insane. Upstairs? That's where these things always get worse. Everyone knows that. We don't have a choice." Daniel snapped, his voice breaking with desperation. A sudden knock echoed from the front door. 3 loud bangs that reverberated through the farmhouse. Everyone froze. Did someone just knock? Sophie whispered, horrified. The knock came again, and then a voice, a low, muffled whisper from behind the door. "Let me in. It's so cold out here." The voice was Marcus's. The knock came a third time, slower now, almost pleading. "Please, it's me. Open the door. Don't leave me out here." Rachel clutched Sophie's arm, her entire body shaking. "That's Marcus. It's his voice." Daniel's jaw tightened. His rational mind screamed it can't be him, but the sound was unmistakable. The same tone, the same pitch, even the same way Marcus always dragged out his vowels when he was desperate. Ethan raised the pan like a weapon, his voice trembling. We all saw it. That thing pulled him into the walls. Nobody survives that. The whisper outside grew more urgent, more human. Rachel, Sophie, it hurts in here. Please let me in. Don't make me stay out here alone. Rachel broke down, tears streaking her face. She started forward, but Daniel grabbed her arm. Don't. It's not him. It's using him. Her eyes burned with rage and grief. What if it is him, Daniel? What if he got out? We can't just abandon him. The knocking grew violent, pounding now, rattling the entire frame of the farmhouse door. With each slam, the lights flickered and the walls shivered. Let me in. The voice bellowed suddenly. No longer Marcus's, but something deep, guttural, and broken. The sound reverberated in their chests, making their bones ache. Everyone stumbled back, horrified, as the wood around the door began to splinter inward, as if something far larger than Marcus was trying to force its way inside. Then, just as suddenly, the pounding stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. The group stood frozen, every breath loud in the suffocating quiet. Then came a sound from upstairs. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, as if someone or something was waiting for them above. Sophie, her voice barely audible, whispered, "If it's not Marcus outside, then who's walking upstairs?" The footsteps upstairs were slow and deliberate, each creak of the old floorboards echoing through the farmhouse like a countdown. The four of them stood frozen at the base of the staircase, staring up into the yawning darkness above. "We're not going up there," Rachel said firmly, shaking her head. "Whatever that is, it wants us to follow. And staying down here is better?" Ethan snapped, pointing at the blood-stained wall where Marcus had vanished. "This place is closing in on us. The only way out might be up there." Daniel clenched his jaw. He knew Ethan was right, even if the thought made his stomach turn. He shone his flashlight up the stairs. The beam barely cut through the blackness. It was as if the darkness itself was swallowing the light. "Stay close," he whispered. Don't look away from each other." Reluctantly, they began to climb. Each step groaned beneath their weight, the sound impossibly loud in the suffocating silence. Sophie clutched Daniel's arm so tightly her nails dug into his skin. Rachel brought up the rear, glancing back nervously toward the front door as if expecting it to burst open again. At the top of the stairs, the air grew colder, their breaths visible in faint puffs. The hallway stretched before them, lined with doors on either side. Some were slightly ajar, others firmly closed. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, and faint symbols had been scratched into the wood near the doorframes. Ethan pointed with the flashlight. "What the hell are those?" "Looks like letters." Daniel leaned closer, his heart pounding. They weren't letters. They were names. Dozens of names etched deep into the wood, each one followed by a date. Most were faded, some going back decades. And then Rachel saw it. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking. There it was, freshly carved, the wood still raw. "Marcus Holloway, 2025. Sophie's scream pierced the silence, and they all spun around. At the far end of the hallway, silhouetted in the weak glow of a broken window, stood a figure. It was Marcus, or what was left of him. His body was twisted, unnaturally elongated, as if the walls had stretched him before spitting him back out. His head lolled to one side, his mouth open in a silent scream. His eyes, those once familiar brown eyes, were nothing but pits of black, dripping shadow down his face. He took a step forward. The floorboards wailed beneath his weight. Rachel sobbed, covering her mouth. No, it can't be." Marcus's body convulsed, and when he spoke, it wasn't his voice. It was a chorus of voices, children, men, women, all overlapping in a grotesque harmony. "You are next." The lights flickered violently. The doors along the hallway slammed shut one by one, trapping them on the upper floor. And Marcus began to run. The twisted thing, wearing Marcus's body, charged down the hallway, its limbs jerking unnaturally like a broken marionette. The four screamed and bolted, their footsteps pounding against the warped floorboards. "Go, go, go!" Daniel yelled, shoving Sophie forward. Rachel yanked the nearest door open, and they stumbled inside just as Marcus's warped form slammed into the wall behind them. The door shook violently under the impact, the wood cracking as his claws scraped deep gouges into it. "Hold it shut," Ethan cried, throwing his shoulder against the door. Daniel and Rachel joined, bracing it with all their strength. The pounding continued, each slam rattling the walls, but finally silence. The four collapsed back, panting, their flashlights trembling in their hands. The room they had chosen was a bedroom, dusty, decayed, yet strangely preserved. The bed was neatly made with moth-eaten sheets. A dresser stood against the far wall, and a cracked mirror leaned in the corner. But something about the air was wrong. The cold here was sharper, biting, like being submerged in ice water. Sophie rubbed her arms, shivering. "This room feels worse than the hallway." Daniel's flashlight swept across the dresser. Its surface was covered with framed photographs. He moved closer, his breath hitching. The pictures were all of families, smiling mothers, stern fathers, children frozen in black and white. But as he leaned closer, his stomach twisted. The faces were scratched out, every single one. Long gouges torn through the photos where eyes and mouths should be. Rachel gagged. "Oh God, it's like someone didn't want them remembered." Then Sophie let out a sharp gasp. "Look at the mirror." They all turned. The cracked mirror reflected the four of them huddled together. But there was someone else too, standing right behind them. A woman. Her figure was gaunt, her dress old-fashioned and tattered, her face half-hidden beneath stringy black hair. What skin was visible sagged as if rotting, her lips pulled back in a perpetual grin. But when they spun around, the room was empty. The mirror, however, showed her still there. And this time, she raised a finger and pointed directly at Rachel. Rachel's knees buckled, and she screamed. The mirror shattered on its own, shards exploding across the room. At the same moment, the bedroom door burst inward, Marcus's twisted body forcing its way inside. His eyes burned with black fire, his mouth stretched too wide, his scream inhuman. "Run!" Daniel roared. The bedroom door splintered apart as Marcus's twisted form forced its way in, his body bending at grotesque angles that no human should survive. His jaw cracked open wider than a man's skull could allow, releasing a shriek that rattled the broken mirror shards scattered across the floor. "Move!" Daniel bellowed, grabbing Sophie by the arm. The group scrambled toward the far side of the room, but Marcus lunged. His unnaturally long arms swept across the space, slamming Ethan against the wall with bone-jarring force. Ethan gasped, blood running from his nose as he crumpled, dazed. "Ethan!" Rachel screamed, trying to reach him. Marcus staggered closer, his claw-like hands dragging across the walls, gouging deep trenches into the wood. The air reeked of rot, and a chorus of whispers filled the room, overlapping until they became maddening. Daniel spotted the window, its glass cracked and fogged over. The window. "Go!" Sophie didn't hesitate. She ran, grabbing a chair and hurling it through the glass. It shattered outward, shards raining into the night. Cold wind and rain blasted into the room, cutting through the suffocating rot. But Marcus was faster. He grabbed Rachel by the wrist, yanking her back with inhuman strength. She shrieked as her skin blistered under his touch, black veins crawling up her arm like poison. Daniel rushed forward, swinging a broken shard of mirror like a blade. He slashed across Marcus's arm, and to his shock, the creature recoiled, black smoke hissing from the wound as it shrieked. Rachel collapsed free, clutching her burning wrist. Ethan, half conscious, forced himself up. "Go. I'll hold him." No, Sophie cried, but Ethan shoved her toward the window. Marcus lunged again, his body jerking like a puppet as his black eyes locked onto Ethan. Ethan grabbed a shard of glass from the floor and raised it like a dagger, his teeth bared. "Come on, you bastard." Daniel, Sophie, and Rachel climbed through the shattered window, the rain soaking them instantly. Behind them, Ethan's scream split the night, cut short, strangled, and then drowned out by the sound of bones breaking. Rachel sobbed uncontrollably as Daniel dragged her into the yard, Sophie stumbling behind. None of them dared to look back. The farmhouse loomed above, its windows glowing faintly as though eyes were watching them leave. But they weren't free. Not yet, because the rain-soaked yard was lined with dozens of wooden crosses, each one with a name carved into it, and 3 of them, freshly cut, bore the names: Ethan Clark, Rachel Davis, Sophie Miller. The rain poured harder, soaking their clothes, plastering hair to their faces as the 3 stumbled into the yard. Their breaths came ragged, steam rising in the cold night air. Rachel froze when she saw the wooden crosses. "No, no, this isn't real," she whispered, running to the nearest one. Her trembling fingers traced her own name carved deep into the damp wood. Rachel Davis, 2025. Sophie let out a strangled sob. "It's already decided. What next?" Daniel grabbed her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "No, it wants us to believe that. That's how it wins." Before Sophie could answer, a low groan drifted through the storm. One by one, the crosses began to shift. The soil beneath them bulged, cracked, and then split open. From the mud, skeletal hands clawed upward. "Run," Daniel shouted. The 3 bolted through the rows as corpses dragged themselves from the earth. Their hollow eye sockets glowed faintly, filled with the same black fire they'd seen in Marcus. The dead pulled themselves free, farmers in rotted overalls, women in decayed dresses, children with broken dolls still clutched in their bony fingers. Rachel tripped, landing hard in the mud. Hands grabbed her ankle, cold and slick, dragging her toward a half-open grave. She screamed, kicking wildly. Daniel spun and slammed his boot into the corpse's skull, shattering it into black dust. He yanked Rachel up, her sobs mixing with the thunder overhead. There, Sophie pointed through the storm. Beyond the graveyard, a barn loomed, its doors swaying in the wind. They sprinted, dodging grasping hands, stumbling over broken headstones and open pits. The rain turned the mud into a sucking mire, slowing their every step. Behind them, the corpses wailed in unison, a chorus of voices rising to a pitch that split the air like knives. The 3 reached the barn doors and shoved them open. They slipped inside, slamming them shut just as the first of the dead reached the threshold. The pounding began immediately, fists and claws scratching at the wood. The interior was pitch black, the smell of mildew and rust heavy in the air. Daniel raised his flashlight, its weak beam cutting across hay bales, rusted tools, and the skeleton of an old horse, its ribs jutting like jagged knives. Rachel hugged herself, shivering violently. "We're trapped again. Everywhere we go, it traps us." Sophie swallowed hard, her eyes darting around. At least it's not the house. But as the flashlight beams swept across the rafters, they froze. Hanging from the beams were dozens of ropes, nooses. Each swayed gently, though the air inside the barn was still. And then one of them tightened on its own. A whisper hissed from the darkness above. "Pick one." The whisper echoed through the rafters, chilling their bones. "Pick one." Daniel's flashlight trembled as it swept across the barn again. The nooses swayed harder now, creaking against the beams though there was no wind. Rachel shook her head violently, backing against the wall. "No, no, this isn't happening." Before Daniel could respond, one of the nooses dropped suddenly, snapping tight around his shoulder. He cried out as it yanked him upward, dragging him off his feet toward the ceiling. "Daniel!" Sophie screamed, leaping to grab his legs. The rope burned against his skin, tightening like a snake. Rachel rushed forward, clawing at the rope where it bit into Daniel's flesh. But the more they pulled, the tighter it became, cutting into him, drawing blood. His face twisted in pain as he gasped for air. The other nooses began to stir. One dropped around Rachel's wrist, wrenching her arm skyward. Another lashed out like a whip, missing Sophie by inches as she stumbled back. The barn filled with the sound of rope snapping, twisting, tightening alive. Daniel's voice rasped, strained. The knife looked for a knife. Sophie darted toward a rusted tool rack, scanning desperately. She grabbed a sickle, its blade corroded but sharp enough. Running back, she swung at the rope around Daniel. It resisted at first, the fibers unnaturally strong. But with a desperate scream, she hacked through. The rope snapped, recoiling upward like a snake, and Daniel crashed to the ground, coughing violently, clutching his neck. Rachel's wrist was still caught, the rope dragging her toward the rafters. Sophie slashed again, slicing it open. Black smoke hissed from the severed fibers, filling the air with the stench of burnt flesh. The nooses above writhed in fury, twisting together like serpents, lashing down toward them. Daniel staggered to his feet, his voice hoarse. "We can't stay here." Sophie pointed toward the back of the barn. A narrow set of stairs led upward to a loft. "There, maybe we can get out through the hayloft." The three sprinted for the stairs, ropes snapping down all around them, grazing their shoulders, wrapping briefly around ankles before being torn free. Rachel screamed as one brushed her throat, leaving a raw red line. They reached the loft and shoved open the hatch. Cold wind blasted in, rain streaking sideways through the storm. Below, the barn filled with writhing ropes, striking upward like a nest of snakes. "Jump!" Daniel roared over the storm. One by one, they leapt into the night, crashing into the mud outside. Sophie rolled painfully, her ankle twisting, but she forced herself up. Rachel clutched her wrist, blood trickling where the rope had torn her skin. Daniel dragged them both toward the forest beyond the barn. Behind them, the barn groaned. Its doors burst open, ropes spilling out into the storm, dragging themselves across the ground as if searching for prey. The farmhouse loomed in the distance, its windows glowing brighter now, as if it was alive and watching. And from within the trees ahead came a new sound, soft singing, a woman's lullaby, echoing through the storm. Rachel froze. "Please tell me I'm imagining that." But the singing grew louder, closer. The storm whipped around them, but the lullaby carried clear, almost sweet, threading through the roar of the wind. Sophie clutched her side, struggling to breathe. "It's coming from ahead from the woods." Daniel shook his head violently, mud dripping from his hair. No, we're not going toward that." But Rachel wasn't moving. Her eyes were fixed on the dark tree line, her lips trembling. I know that song." The others turned to her, wide-eyed. Rain streaked down her pale face. "My grandmother used to hum it when I was little. She said it was the family song." The lullaby grew clearer, closer, as though the woman was only a few steps away, waiting among the trees. Branches swayed violently in the storm, shadows shifting like figures. Sophie grabbed Rachel's arm. "It's a trick. The house, it knows you. It's using you." But Rachel shook her head, dazed. "No, it can't be. I've never even been here." Daniel snapped, his voice raw. "Then why the hell does this place know your song?" Before Rachel could answer, a figure emerged from the trees. A woman, drenched in rain, her hair plastered to her pale face. She wore a torn white dress, clinging to her skin, mud streaking the fabric. She sang the lullaby softly, her eyes locked on Rachel. Rachel's breath caught. "Grandma." The woman's head tilted, water streaming from her hair. Her smile was wrong, too wide, too knowing. Daniel stepped in front of Rachel, holding the sickle like a weapon. "Stay back." The woman didn't stop singing. Her voice deepened, reverberating unnaturally through the air. With each note, the ropes from the barn twisted closer across the mud, drawn toward her like she was commanding them. Sophie stumbled back, dragging Rachel with her. "She's not your grandmother, Rachel. Look at her." The woman's face flickered in the lightning, her features twisting, half grandmother, half something skeletal and rotted beneath. The lullaby distorted into a low, guttural growl, shaking the ground. Suddenly, the ropes snapped forward from behind, lashing toward them like whips. Daniel swung the sickle wildly, cutting one aside, but three more coiled around his legs, dragging him down into the mud. Rachel screamed, torn between running and reaching for the figure that looked like her grandmother. The woman's voice whispered now, layered and echoing. "Come home, Rachel. Come home to us." The ropes tightened around Daniel's legs, dragging him face first into the mud. He thrashed, swinging the sickle, but for every coil he cut, two more slithered from the darkness. His roar of effort was drowned by the storm. "Daniel!" Sophie cried, pulling at the ropes, her hands burning from the wet, coarse fibers. Rachel didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the woman, swaying at the edge of the trees. The voice was softer now, like velvet. "Don't fight it, Rachel," the woman whispered, though her lips hardly moved. "You've always belonged here. That's why you came." Rachel shook her head weakly, her soaked hair whipping in the wind. "No, I didn't know." The woman extended her arms. Rain streaked down her withered hands, fingers far too long, curling like talons. Yet her face still bore the resemblance of Rachel's grandmother. "Yes, you did. Blood always finds its way home." Sophie's voice cut through the storm, panicked and furious. "Rachel, don't listen. She isn't real." But Rachel stepped forward. Her bare feet splashed into the mud, and the ropes immediately loosened their grip on Daniel, as though the farmhouse only needed one sacrifice. Daniel gasped for air, glaring at Rachel in disbelief. "You're killing us all if you go to her," he shouted hoarsely. The woman in the trees smiled wider, her mouth splitting at the corners until it was far too large for her face. Her lullaby shifted into a chorus of voices, children crying, women wailing, men groaning in pain, all layered together in a nightmarish harmony. Rachel clutched her head, dropping to her knees in the mud. "Stop, please." The woman moved closer, her white dress dragging along the ground, mud soaking the fabric. Her eyes glowed faintly, two pits of pale fire. "Step into the trees, child," she crooned, "and it will end." Sophie grabbed Rachel by the shoulders, shaking her violently. "Listen to me. That's not your family. That's death. If you go to her, you're never coming back." Rachel's body shook, torn between Sophie's desperate hands and the dark pull of the apparition. And then, in a voice that was not entirely her own, Rachel whispered, "I think I've been here before." The trees seemed to bend closer, waiting. The storm howled through the clearing, bending the treetops until they nearly touched the ground. Rachel stood frozen between Sophie's trembling grip and the pale figure waiting beyond the tree line. Her lips quivered, her breath forming white clouds in the night air despite the heavy rain. The woman's lullaby warped again, voices overlapping in grotesque harmony. Now the cries of infants mingled with the moans of the dying, every note laced with unbearable grief. Each sound seemed to claw into Rachel's chest, burrowing deep into her heart. Daniel staggered to his feet, his clothes torn and caked in mud, the sickle still clutched in his fist. "Rachel, fight it. That thing isn't your grandmother. It's wearing her face." But Rachel's eyes glazed over, pupils dilated. Slowly she whispered, "She knows me." Suddenly, the ropes that had slackened whipped back into motion. They coiled around Rachel's ankles and wrists, yanking her violently toward the trees. Sophie screamed and held on, nearly being dragged along with her. Mud splattered as Rachel was pulled inch by inch toward the apparition. "No, no, let me go." Sophie howled, digging her heels into the wet ground. Her nails tore against the ropes, but they burned her palms with each tug. Daniel lunged forward, slashing at the cords with the sickle. He managed to slice one free, but the others tightened with a hiss, pulling Rachel's body across the ground. Her face smashed into the mud, yet her eyes never left the figure. The woman in white crouched low now, waiting with arms spread like a mother welcoming her child home. Her smile stretched to inhuman lengths, her cheeks tearing until rivulets of black fluid leaked down. Rachel screamed, half in terror, half in longing. The trees opened unnaturally, their trunks twisting aside, as though creating a passage into endless blackness. The lullaby thundered, so loud it shook their bones. Daniel hacked furiously, his breath ragged. "Sophie, hold her tight." Sophie wrapped both arms around Rachel's chest, locking her in place. "You're not taking her. Do you hear me? You're not taking her." For a brief moment, the ropes slackened again, but then the ground beneath Rachel began to split, the mud parting into a yawning hole filled with writhing shadows. From it, pale skeletal hands clawed upward, grasping for her legs. Rachel shrieked, thrashing, her voice echoing with both her own fear and something far older, far darker. The woman's voice carried above the storm. "Blood returns to blood. Flesh returns to the earth. She is mine." Daniel raised the sickle high, lightning flashing across his face. "Over my dead body." Daniel brought the sickle down with a furious scream. The blade ripped through the ropes binding Rachel's arms, the cut echoing like thunder itself. The coils writhed and dissolved into black smoke, shrieking as if alive. But the skeletal hands clawing from the pit gripped Rachel's legs, dragging her downward. Mud sucked her body deeper, her mouth filling with filthy water as she screamed. Sophie clung to her waist, sobbing, refusing to let go. Daniel leapt into the pit, swinging wildly. Bone fragments shattered as the sickle slashed through the grasping hands, the storm's lightning illuminating his every strike. The woman in white screeched, her lullaby turning into a shrill wail. Her face tore open further, splitting until it no longer resembled anything human, only a gaping maw filled with rows of blackened teeth. The trees bent lower, their trunks cracking, as though the forest itself was closing in. "Run," Daniel shouted, his voice raw. "Get her to the car." Sophie dragged Rachel, who coughed and spat mud, her eyes wild and terrified. The ropes tried to coil again, but Daniel intercepted them, hacking and cutting until his arms bled. The woman's voice thundered, shaking the ground. "You cannot take what is mine." Daniel roared back, swinging the sickle one final time, severing the largest rope at its root. The earth split violently, the pit collapsing in on itself. The woman shrieked, her body contorting, before being swallowed into the darkness. The sound of her scream carried into the night like a dying storm. Sophie pulled Rachel to her feet, and together they sprinted across the mud. The farmhouse loomed behind them, its windows glowing red like furious eyes. Every step felt like the ground was trying to drag them back. Daniel stumbled after them, gasping, his body battered, but he kept moving, forcing his legs through the sucking mud. "Don't stop," he shouted hoarsely. They reached the car. Sophie fumbled with the keys, her hands slick with blood and rain. The engine coughed once, twice, before roaring to life. Rachel screamed as the farmhouse doors blew open, shadows pouring out like a tidal wave. The lullaby rose again, faint but furious, carried on the wind. "Go," Daniel barked, slamming his body into the passenger seat. Sophie floored the accelerator, tires spinning in the mud before gripping. The car tore down the dirt path, trees whipping past in the headlights. Behind them, the farmhouse seemed to shudder, its walls collapsing inward. A monstrous roar erupted, shaking the earth, before silence fell. The storm began to ease, the rain slowing, the thunder fading into the distance. No one spoke for miles. Rachel sat trembling in the back seat, whispering through cracked lips. She knew me, she knew my name. Sophie gripped the wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. Don't say it. It's over. We survived. But Daniel stared out the cracked windshield, blood dripping from his brow, his face grim. No, it's not over. The house doesn't forget, and it doesn't let go. 2 weeks later, newspapers whispered about the old farmhouse outside Hawthorne, Indiana. Locals avoided the road leading into the woods. Rumors spread about screams heard at night, about a lullaby carried on the wind, about shadows moving in the fields when no one was there. Rachel, Sophie, and Daniel tried to return to their lives in the city, but none of them slept soundly. At night, they swore they still heard the faint hum of that lullaby outside their windows. And every morning, muddy footprints appeared on their doorsteps,